We thought we owned the surface. We were wrong. Something below had been waiting, and it was hungry. Before we descend into the darkness together, if you enjoy stories that blur the line between reality and nightmare, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm a geophysicist. Or at least I was. Now I'm not sure what I am anymore. A witness? A survivor? Maybe just someone who knows too much. What I'm about to tell you didn't make the news. It couldn't. Because if people knew what was really happening beneath their feet, society would collapse overnight. It started in March of 2024 in a town you've never heard of, Millbrook, Montana. Population 3,847. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where the biggest excitement is Friday night football and the annual county fair. I was there as part of a routine geological survey, measuring seismic activity for a university research project on regional fault lines. The morning of March 14th was unremarkable. Cold, clear sky, the kind of crystalline blue that makes the Rockies look painted. I was in my trailer-turned-mobile lab, reviewing seismograph readings from the previous night, when I noticed something odd. The data showed vibrations, rhythmic, patterned vibrations, that didn't match any natural seismic activity I'd ever seen. Earthquakes have signatures. Tectonic shifts create specific wave patterns, P waves, S waves, surface waves. These were different. The frequency was too regular, almost like a heartbeat, and they came in clusters, with long pauses between each series, as if something was moving, then stopping, then moving again. I called my colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb. Marcus was old school, skeptical of anything that didn't fit textbook geology. Probably mining equipment, he said over the phone, his voice crackling with static, or fracking. They're doing that all over Montana now. But there was no mining operation within 100 miles of Millbrook, no fracking sites, nothing that could explain the pattern I was seeing. That evening, I decided to walk through town, talk to locals, see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. The sun was setting, casting long shadows between the buildings on Main Street. The air smelled like pine and diesel fuel from the gas station on the corner. Everything felt normal. Too normal. I stopped at Hank's Diner, a faded red brick building with a neon sign that buzzed like an angry wasp. Inside, the place was nearly empty. Just old Hank behind the counter and two truckers hunched over coffee at the far booth. The fluorescent lights gave everything a sickly yellow tinge. "Good evening, Doc," Hank said, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. He was in his 60s, weathered face, hands rough from decades of work. "What can I get you?" "Just coffee, thanks." I slid onto a stool. "Hank, have you noticed anything strange lately? Any unusual sounds, vibrations, that kind of thing?" He paused mid-wipe, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Funny you should ask. Last couple weeks, my shell's been rattling at night. Thought maybe it was the foundation settling, but..." He trailed off, glancing toward the floor as if expecting something to emerge from it. "But what?" "My dog won't go in the basement anymore. Rex, he's a German Shepherd, tough as nails. Few nights ago, I opened the basement door and he just backed away, whimpering. Never seen him scared of anything before." A chill ran down my spine. Animals sense things we can't. That's not superstition, it's biology. They detect frequencies, chemical changes in the air, subtle environmental shifts that our duller senses miss. Had anyone else mentioned anything like this? Hank nodded slowly. "Betty Cromwell lives out on Pinecrest Road. She said her horse has been acting spooked, won't stay in the barn. And Tom Reeves, his well dried up last week. Just stopped producing water overnight." I left the diner with more questions than answers. The pattern was beginning to form in my mind, but it was too impossible to believe. Underground water tables don't just disappear. Animals don't suddenly become terrified of enclosed spaces without reason. And seismographs don't record biological rhythms. Unless... I drove back to my trailer as darkness settled over the valley. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants against the star-scattered sky. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, No rustling of nocturnal creatures, just an oppressive silence that seemed to press against my eardrums. Inside the trailer, I booted up my equipment and pulled up the latest readings. The vibrations had increased, not just in frequency, but in amplitude. Whatever was causing them was getting closer to the surface, and it was getting bigger. That's when I heard it. A sound from beneath the trailer, low, grinding like stone scraping against stone. The floor beneath my feet trembled, not violently, but with a deliberate, measured quality that made my stomach drop. I held my breath, listening. The sound stopped, then started again, slightly to the left, moving, circling. My hand shook as I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The night air was frigid, turning my breath to fog. I clicked on the flashlight and aimed it at the ground beneath the trailer. Nothing, just dirt and rocks and the metal supports holding the trailer level. But I could feel it, that primal instinct that evolution hardwired into us, the certainty that something was watching, waiting, hunting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my trailer, monitoring the seismograph, watching the readings spike and fall in that same rhythmic pattern. And with each passing hour, the vibrations grew stronger. By dawn, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. 1, something was alive beneath Millbrook. 2, it was moving with purpose, with intelligence. And 3, I was already too late to stop what was coming.
The disappearances started on March 18th. First, it was Tommy Bradshaw, a 12-year-old kid who didn't come home from school. His bike was found on the side of County Road 7, lying in the dirt, front wheels still spinning. No skid marks, no signs of a struggle, just the bike and one shoe, a red sneaker with the laces still tied. The sheriff organized a search party. Volunteers combed the woods, checked abandoned buildings, dragged Miller's Pond. Nothing. It was as if Tommy had simply evaporated. 2 days later, Lisa Morton vanished. She was 26, a nurse at the local clinic, last seen leaving work at 11 p.m. Her car was found in her driveway, engine still running, driver's door open, purse on the seat. Her keys were in the ignition. The radio was playing, some country song about lost love and empty highways. The town began to panic. I tried to tell Sheriff Dawson about the seismic readings, about the patterns I was seeing. He was a big man, ex-military, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He listened to my explanation with barely concealed skepticism. "Doc, I appreciate your concern, but we're dealing with a very human problem here. Probably some drifter passing through or kidnapper. We're checking sex offender registries, interviewing everyone who might have seen something." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "Doc, I know you scientists like to find complicated answers, but sometimes it's simple. People are monsters. That's all." But people don't leave seismic signatures. People don't make the earth itself vibrate with their movement. That night, I decided to do something reckless. I loaded my portable seismographer into my truck, along with ground-penetrating radar equipment I'd borrowed from the university. If something was down there, I was going to find it. I drove to the location where the vibrations were strongest, a field about 2 miles outside town, abandoned farmland that hadn't been cultivated in years. The grass was waist-high, swaying in the cold wind. The moon was a thin crescent, providing almost no light. I set up my equipment in the center of the field. The radar would show me what was beneath the surface, cavities, tunnels, anything that might explain what was happening. The screen flickered to life, displaying layers of soil, rock, and sediment. At first, everything looked normal, typical geological stratification. Then I adjusted the depth range, going deeper. That's when I saw it. 60 feet below the surface, a massive cavity. Not a natural cave formation. The walls were too smooth, too uniform. It was a tunnel, at least 15 feet in diameter, running in multiple directions like the branches of some vast underground tree. And something was moving inside it. The radar picked up a dense mass, shifting slowly through the tunnel network. It was huge, bigger than any vehicle, bigger than any animal I could imagine. The shape was irregular, organic, pulsing with what looked like internal movement. My mouth dried. My hands trembled as I adjusted the controls, trying to get a clearer image. That's when the ground beneath me collapsed. I fell, the world spinning into darkness. My scream echoed off stone walls as I plummeted through empty space. I hit something soft, earth, loose dirt, that broke my fall but knocked the wind from my lungs. I lay there in the darkness, gasping, my ribs screaming with pain. The air was thick, humid, with a smell I couldn't identify, something organic and rotten, like decomposing flesh mixed with wet earth. I fumbled for my flashlight. My fingers found it, but the lens was cracked. The beam was weak, flickering, but it was enough. I was in a tunnel. The walls were smooth, almost polished, as if something had bored through the earth and compressed the soil into a hard surface. The tunnel stretched in both directions, disappearing into absolute blackness. And along those walls, I could see marks, gouges, as if something with massive claws had scraped against the stone. I tried to stand, but pain shot through my left ankle, sprained, maybe broken. I leaned against the wall, the cold seeping through my jacket. That's when I heard it, a sound from deep within the tunnel, low, resonant, like a whale's call but layered with something else, a clicking, chittering noise that made my skin crawl. It was getting closer. I started moving, dragging myself down the tunnel in the opposite direction, away from the sound. Every movement sent agony through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me going. The flashlight beam bounced off the walls, creating grotesque shadows. The tunnel began to widen, and then I saw them. Bones. Scattered across the floor of the tunnel, human bones, picked clean, cracked open to expose the marrow inside. Skulls with empty eye sockets staring at nothing. Ribs broken and discarded like refuse. Tommy Bradshaw's red sneaker lay among the remains. I bit back a sob, covering my mouth to keep from screaming, because that sound, that clicking, chittering sound was getting louder. I turned, shining my failing flashlight back the way I had come, and I saw it. It defied description, defied logic, defied everything I thought I knew about biology and evolution. The creature was massive, at least 12 feet tall when it reared up on its hind quarters. Its body was segmented, like an insect's, covered in chitinous plates that gleamed wetly in the dim light. But it had too many limbs, 6, 8, maybe more, each ending in curved claws that scraped against the tunnel walls as it moved. Its head was the worst part, elongated, eyeless, with a mouth that split vertically into 4 sections lined with thousands of needle-like teeth. When it opened that mouth, I could see down into its throat, rings of muscle pulsing, pulling, designed to drag prey into its digestive system while still alive. It had no eyes, but I knew it could sense me. The head swiveled in my direction, those mandibles clicking, tasting the air. I ran. Pain didn't matter. Fear consumed everything else. I stumbled through the darkness, my flashlight dying, casting the tunnel into deeper shadow with each passing second. Behind me, the creature moved with terrifying speed, its claws scraping, that clicking sound echoing like a chorus of death. The tunnel began to slope upward. I could feel fresher air, see a faint glimmer of light ahead. An opening. Another collapse point where the tunnel had breached the surface. I threw myself toward it, climbing, scrambling, fingers digging into dirt and rock. The creature was right behind me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from its body, could smell the putrid scent of decay on its breath. I pulled myself through the opening just as those claws swiped at my legs. I felt them tear through my jeans, felt warm blood running down my calf. And then I was out, gasping, rolling away from the hole. I looked back just in time to see the creature's head emerge, that horrible, eyeless face, before it retreated back into the darkness with a shriek that didn't sound like any earthly animal. I lay there in the grass, staring up at the stars, my body shaking uncontrollably. Whatever was down there, it wasn't alone. Those tunnels stretched for miles, and if there was one of those things, there were more. Many more.
I made it back to town just as dawn was breaking. My truck was still in the field, but I didn't care. I limped down Main Street, covered in dirt and blood, my mind barely functioning. Sheriff Dawson found me sitting on the steps of the police station. He took one look at me and called for an ambulance. "Jesus Christ, Doc, what happened to you?" I told him everything. The tunnels, the creature, the bones. As I spoke, I watched his expression shift from concern to disbelief to something that looked almost like pity. "Sarah," he said gently, using my first name for the first time, "you've been under a lot of stress. These disappearances, they're getting to all of us. But what you're describing, it's not possible." "I know how it sounds," I said, my voice hoarse. "But I saw it. It's real. And there are more of them." The paramedics arrived and insisted on taking me to the clinic. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I saw people gathering on the street, whispering, staring. I could imagine what they were thinking. The crazy scientist lady finally lost it. At the clinic, Dr. Morrison examined my injuries. The cuts on my leg were deep, but clean. "Animal attack," he said, frowning. "Could be a bear, maybe a mountain lion. You're lucky you got away." I saw it. He didn't respond, just gave me a shot for the pain and started stitching. That afternoon, more people disappeared. 4 this time, all from different parts of town. A married couple in their 50s, a teenage girl, an elderly man who ran the hardware store. And that's when the attacks started happening above ground. It was around 8 p.m. when I heard the screams. I was lying in a hospital bed, doped up on painkillers, when the entire building shook. Not like an earthquake, more focused, more violent, as if something had struck the foundation from below. The lights flickered and died. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in red light. More screams, closer now. I pulled myself out of bed, ignoring the protests of my battered body, and made my way to the window. What I saw made my blood freeze. Main Street was chaos. People were running, scattering in every direction, and rising from the pavement, punching through concrete and asphalt like tissue paper, were the creatures. There were dozens of them. They emerged from sinkholes that opened spontaneously, their chitinous bodies reflecting the emergency lights in sickening patterns. They moved with horrible efficiency, grabbing anyone too slow to escape, dragging them back down into the earth. Their clicking filled the air, a cacophony of alien hunger. Sheriff Dawson and his deputies were trying to fight back, firing their weapons, but bullets seemed to do nothing. They ricocheted off their armored plates, sparking uselessly. One creature grabbed a deputy, a young man I'd seen around town, and lifted him off the ground. He screamed, firing his pistol point blank into that eyeless face. The creature's mandibles opened and closed around his torso, cutting him in half with the sound of breaking bones and tearing flesh. I turned away, vomiting onto the floor. Dr. Morrison burst into the room. "We have to evacuate, now." He helped me down the stairs and out a side exit. The parking lot was filled with people trying to get to their vehicles. Engines roared to life, tires squealed, and then the ground beneath the parking lot collapsed. Cars, people, asphalt, everything
plunged into a massive sinkhole that appeared in seconds. The screams were cut short as the darkness swallowed them whole. "Run!" Morrison shouted, pulling me toward the road. We made it to the highway, joining a stream of refugees fleeing Millbrook. Behind us, the town was being consumed. Buildings collapsed as more sinkholes opened. The creatures moved through the wreckage, hunting, feeding, their clicking blending with the sounds of destruction. We drove through the night, heading east. Other survivors joined us, a convoy of terrified people with nowhere to go. Some were injured. Others were in shock, staring blankly at nothing. I sat in a dingy motel room 50 miles from Millbrook, watching the news on a fuzzy television. The reporter was standing outside the town limits, emergency vehicles visible in the background. Authorities are calling it an unprecedented seismic event. Multiple sinkholes have opened throughout the town, causing catastrophic structural damage. The National Guard has been deployed to assist with rescue operations, but officials warn that the area remains unstable and extremely dangerous. Seismic event. That's what they were calling it. I knew better.
Over the next week, it became clear that Millbrook wasn't an isolated incident. Reports started coming in from other towns across Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. Sinkholes opening without warning, people disappearing, strange sounds coming from beneath the earth. The government tried to keep it quiet, but you can't hide something this big. Videos started appearing online, shaky footage of creatures emerging from the ground, attacking, retreating. Most people dismissed them as hoaxes, CGI, viral marketing for some horror movie. But those of us who survived Millbrook knew the truth. I was contacted by a group calling themselves the Subterranean Research Initiative. Scientists, military personnel, survivors from various incidents. They'd been tracking the phenomenon for months, ever since the first attacks began in rural Alaska back in January. Their theory was terrifying in its simplicity. These creatures had always been there, living deep beneath the earth, in a vast network of tunnels that spanned the entire continent. For millions of years, they'd remained dormant, feeding on whatever they could find in the depths, minerals, underground water sources, perhaps even magma for energy. But something had changed. Human activity, mining, fracking, geothermal drilling, had disturbed their habitat. We'd woken them up, and now they were hungry. More than that, they were adapting, evolving, learning. The attacks became more coordinated. The creatures started targeting infrastructure, power plants, water treatment facilities, communication towers. They weren't just hunting for food, they were waging war. Cities began to fall. Not all at once, but in pieces. A neighborhood here, a district there. The creatures would strike at night, creating entry points, dragging people down into the tunnels. By morning, entire blocks would be cordoned off, too dangerous to enter. The military response was massive, but ineffective. How do you fight an enemy that attacks from below, that can appear anywhere there's earth? Bombs were dropped into sinkholes. Napalm was poured into tunnel systems. Chemical weapons were deployed. Nothing worked. The tunnel networks were too vast, too deep. For every creature killed, 10 more appeared. Humanity began to retreat. Coastal cities became refugee centers, places where bedrock was shallow, where tunnels couldn't easily form. But even those weren't completely safe. The creatures adapted, learning to breach through sewer systems, subway tunnels, any underground passage that humans had carved. I joined the Subterranean Research Initiative's headquarters in San Francisco. We occupied the top floors of a skyscraper, reasoning that height offered some protection. Our mission was to find a weakness, some way to fight back. Dr. Elias Crane led the team, a thin, intense man with haunted eyes. He'd been studying the creatures since the Alaska incidents, collecting data,
running simulations. They're not insects, he explained during one briefing, showing us microscopic images of creature tissue. And they're not mammals. Their biology is unlike anything in the fossil record. My theory? They're older than any known species on Earth. Maybe they evolved in the deep subsurface, in conditions we can't even imagine. How do we kill them? Sheriff Dawson asked. He'd survived Millbrook and had been recruited for his tactical experience. Crane shook his head. We don't know yet. Their exoskeleton is incredibly dense, harder than steel. Their internal structure is redundant. They have multiple hearts, distributed nervous systems. Destroying one part doesn't stop them. There has to be a way, I said. There is, Crane replied, pulling up a geological map. Fire, extreme heat. If we can raise the temperature in their tunnels to over 2,000 degrees, we can potentially collapse the entire network. How? He smiled grimly. Volcanic eruption, induced seismic activity. We create earthquakes so powerful that we crack the mantle itself, flood the tunnels with magma. Dawson stared at him. You're talking about destroying half the continent. I'm talking about survival. If we don't act, these creatures will inherit the Earth. We'll be extinct within a decade. The plan was insane, but so was our situation.
3 months after Millbrook fell, Operation Prometheus was approved. The plan was to detonate a series of thermobaric bombs along the Yellowstone caldera fault lines, triggering a controlled eruption that would flood the tunnel networks with magma. The explosion would be catastrophic. Millions would die, and much of the central United States would become uninhabitable. But it might save the species. I volunteered for the insertion team. We needed someone who understood seismic activity, who could place the charges at precise locations deep underground. It was a suicide mission. We all knew it. The team consisted of 12 people, military specialists, engineers, scientists. We descended into the tunnel system through a fortified entrance in Wyoming, each of us carrying explosives and equipment. The tunnels were worse than I remembered. Miles of smooth passages carved through solid rock, branching in every direction. The air was hot, sulfurous, difficult to breathe even with respirators. And everywhere, there were signs of the creatures. Shed exoskeletons, egg sacs pulsing with obscene life. The walls were covered in a biological film that seemed to absorb light. We moved in silence, communicating through hand signals. Every shadow could hide death. Every sound could be our last warning. On the 3rd day, we reached the first detonation point, a massive chamber where 4 major tunnel branches converged. The walls here were different, covered in what looked like writing, symbols carved deep into the rock. They're intelligent, Dr. Park whispered, studying the markings. This is language. Doesn't matter. Set the charges. As we worked, I couldn't stop staring at those symbols. What were they? History? Religion? A warning? That's when the attack came. They swarmed from every tunnel entrance, dozens of creatures moving with horrifying coordination. Our team opened fire, but it was useless. The creatures tore through us like paper. I ran, dropping my equipment, fumbling for the detonator. If I could just trigger the explosives early, maybe it would be enough. Behind me, I heard screams cut short, wet tearing sounds, the clicking of mandibles. I reached a side passage and pressed myself against the wall, trying to control my breathing. The creature passed within feet of me, so close I could have touched it. Its eyeless head swiveled, sensing, searching. Then it moved on. I waited until the sounds faded before emerging. The main chamber was carnage. Bodies, what was left of them, lay scattered among the rocks. The explosives were destroyed. Mission failed. I made my way back toward the surface alone, following the markers we'd left. It took 4 days. 4 days of hiding, running, praying that I wouldn't be found. When I finally emerged into sunlight, I collapsed. A rescue team found me 12 hours later, delirious and half dead from dehydration. Operation Prometheus had failed. 3 other insertion teams had met similar fates. The creatures were too many, too well defended. Humanity's last great plan had crumbled.
That was 2 years ago. Today, I'm writing this from New Vancouver, one of the floating cities we built offshore. Humanity abandoned the continents. We had no choice. The creatures own the land now. We live on artificial islands, on ships, in coastal enclaves protected by deep water. We've learned that the creatures can't tunnel through ocean bedrock. It's our only advantage. The old world is gone. Cities are tombs. Forests are hunting grounds. Mountains hide tunnel entrances. Sometimes at night, I dream about that first creature I saw beneath Millbrook, that eyeless face, those clicking mandibles. And I wonder, were we ever really the dominant species? Or were we just borrowing the surface, living in ignorance of what waited below? We call ourselves survivors, but I'm not sure that's accurate. We're refugees, displaced, clinging to the edges of a world that no longer belongs to us. Dr. Crane still believes we can reclaim the land. He's working on new weapons, new strategies, but I see the truth in his eyes, the same truth I see in my own reflection. We lost. The earth rejected us, and something older, something that had been waiting in the deep dark for eons, rose up to take what we thought was ours. I still monitor seismic readings, even now. Old habits die hard. And sometimes, late at night, I detect vibrations beneath the ocean floor. Rhythmic, patterned vibrations. Like a heartbeat. Like movement. The creatures are still down there, still expanding their territory. And I can't help but wonder, how deep is the ocean bedrock, really? How long until they learn to tunnel through water itself? How long until there's nowhere left to run? If you're watching this, if you've made it this far, remember, we thought we knew our world. We were wrong. The darkness beneath our feet was never empty. It was patient. And now, in our floating cities and coastal refuges, we're learning a terrible truth. Earth was never ours alone. We were just guests, and our time is up. What would you do if the ground beneath you became the enemy? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story made you question what lies beneath your own feet, well, maybe hit that subscribe button. You'll want to be ready for what comes next.